Hey folks, welcome to Moonshift Audio. These days there are a lot of different compressor plugins to choose from, and many of them are modelled on various types of hardware unit, each with different characteristics, advantages and disadvantages. In this video I'm going to give you an overview of each type and show you some examples of different plugins and how they can best be used. Before we get stuck in, I just want to quickly introduce myself. My name's Jack, I'm a UK based producer and mix engineer. I put out a new video like this every week, so please do like and subscribe. If you're working on your mixing and you're learning here on YouTube, you might be interested in my Mix Exploder service, where I give your track a professional mix here in my studio. Then I make you a personalized video where I go over literally everything I did to give you that sound. So then you can see exactly what you need to take your mixes to the next level on your own material. For now though, let's take a look at our first type of compressor, VCA. One of the most common types of compressors, VCA stands for voltage controlled amplifier. These compressors are quite transparent and they don't usually apply much distortion, so they're a popular choice for a clean compression sound, but they can still actually be quite aggressive if you push them hard. You can usually get quite precise control over these compressors, and they're quite predictable in the way that they respond to different sources, but they're most famously employed on buses, or on the master, where the SSLG bus compressor made its name. Let's have a listen to some examples. Okay, so here we are in Cubase, and I've got a very simple jam that I've thrown together with a few samples that I got off Splice just for this demonstration. It's a kind of poppy funk sort of vibe. We can have a listen.
Are you ready for this? Can you see what I see? I'll make it clear to you.
And it's worth mentioning at this point that there is absolutely no processing at all on anything in this project. I've got a few compressors loaded up to show you, but this is completely unmixed, and I'm not going to get deep into the mix. I'm just going to look at compression. So we'll start off checking out some different VCA style compressors and how they can be used. So we'll look at the kick drum to start with, and this is an absolute classic. This is the DBX 160. This is the Waves version, but UAD do one as well, and I think there are some others out there. So let's listen to the kick. And I'll bring in the compressor. The attack and release on this are fixed, but they do work really nicely for drums, is a classic, sometimes bass, even a vocal on occasion if you want something quite aggressive. But you can hear that it becomes quite clicky. Here's without. And that's because the attack is letting the transient on that kick through before the compressor clamps down. The other thing that we're getting is quite a noticeable drop off in the low end on that kick. And that's a feature that's common to quite a few compressors. Generally, low frequencies carry quite a lot more energy than higher frequencies. And so the compressor without a sidechain filter will act harder on those low frequencies. And so you might find that you want to boost them back in afterwards. This compressor does actually have a sidechain filter, so we can see what that's like with that engaged. And that just means that the compressor is not going to be detecting the low end, and you can hear you do get a bit of that low end back in. What the sidechain filter does, if you haven't looked into this before, is it actually high passes the signal that goes to the detection circuit of the compressor. So the compressor ignores low end when it comes to deciding how much to compress. And what that means is we get a compression that's much less biased towards the low end of the signal. And you can hear it feels much fuller. But I would still be inclined to put a little bit of low end back in. I've just used a Pro Q3 here. So here's without that compressor or the EQ. And now with. You can hear that's really solid now. It's tightened it up. You're getting a bit more click, a bit more kind of transient impact on the high end, and that's going to sit in your mix a lot better now. Other classic uses of a VCA compressor would be on the drum bus. So let's take a listen to the drums. Still got that nice tight kick with, I'll leave the compressor on there. And I've got a few different options here. So I've got the SSL, absolute classic bus compressor, probably the most classic. And I've also got a Vertigo VSC2, which is a lesser well known, but one that I actually really like. So Let's have a quick listen to the SSL. This is without. Now you can see here, I'm not taking very much off at all. Like a few dBs is usually enough. And I've got the attack set to 3 milliseconds, which is, not too snappy. And the release on auto. Some VCA compressors have this really nice auto release where basically it's a 2-stage release that tries to release quite quickly after particularly loud parts of the signal come in. Something like a drum transient would be a great example of that. But if you release too quickly overall, you get this kind of really sharp pumping, like the kick or the snare is kind of punching a hole in the audio that's coming through. So they have a 2-stage release where it releases part way really quickly, and then the second stage of the release lets off a bit more slowly, and you get a much smoother compression that it just sounds nice and punchy. Now it's subtle, but the main kick and the snare sound a little bit more punchy. And you can hear, if you listen carefully, those hi-hats are kind of ducking out the way a little bit. There's just a bit of a groove there around the other elements of the kit. If I lower the threshold, you'll hear this a lot more exaggerated. And I'll just bring up the makeup gain here. Now you can obviously really smash this and then perhaps bring the mix down. This is without. Just adding a bit of body there to the drums. We'll have a quick listen to the Vertigo VSC2 now, and it does have quite a similar sound to the SSL, but I think it's a little bit more snappy, which means I really like it on pop kind of material. So here we go. You see I've got the sidechain filter engaged here, so nothing below 90 Hertz is going to be triggering the compression circuit. Let's try with that. With. Again, you can hear just a little bit more punch, a little bit more groove and life in the drums with this compressor on. Another source that VCA compressors can be nice for is something like an acoustic guitar. So here I've got a nice sort of strummed and picked guitar line. And it's a little bit boomy. Some of the full chords kind of jump out a bit. So this loop is crying out for some compression. And let's just have a look at the TDI Kotelnikov, which is a free compressor. I highly recommend it. This is a really nice plugin. And the fact that it's free is just fantastic. Now this compressor is super transparent, which is great for very clean material. People use it in mastering. It's well suited to that. It's also got a 2-stage release. You can see here we've actually got control over the 2 stages of the release. This is just a preset that I've put together specifically for this source material. But you can hear that basically it's just leveling out the volume of that guitar part really nicely. It's bringing out a little bit of the detail and the sort of pick on the strings, but mainly you can see how much that's working. But it doesn't sound too compressed. So the last thing I'm going to show you here is a bit more of a rocky kind of drum loop that might respond well to some slightly heavier compression. We'll put up the UAD SSL bus comp again. Now I can really hear that on the smack of the snare really being brought out by that. And the kick as well. These drums really come to life. And even though we're only doing maybe 3 dBs of compression there, so bus compression is something that works particularly well in kind of rock music. You know, the sound of heavy rock is often quite heavily driven or parallel compression on drum buses in particular, but also guitar buses, vocals. There's a lot of fun to be had with compression in rock music. Now, another classic use of a VCA compressor is on the master bus, but I'm going to come back to that a little bit later on in this video after we've looked at the other types of compressor that I want to show you. Next up, I'm going to take a look at FET or field effect transistor compressors. The clue's in the name of this one, and the hardware units, the gain reduction is achieved with the use of transistors. FET compressors are super fast. The attack and release times on these can be almost instant if you want them to be, which is great on transient-rich source material like drums, as they can be really nice and grabby. But the trade-off is that they can tend to introduce a little bit of distortion. I say trade-off, the colour that this distortion adds often sounds really nice, and a lot of the time I would go for one of these compressors because of the distortion that they impart. The most famous FET compressor is the 1176, first made by Vari, but now available from Universal Audio, but there are countless other plug-in and hardware options available. These compressors are great for drums, bass, heavy guitars, and a lot of the time they work well on vocals if you want an aggressive sound, or in conjunction with another compressor if you don't. Let's see how they sound. Alright, FET compressors. You've got to start with the absolute classic 1176. Now, Universal Audio make the hardware versions of these. They were originally made by Vari, and I feel like the plug-in versions that they do are some of the best available. So let's take a listen to this one on bass. Here's the bass part with no processing at all, apart from there's a bit of stereo information in this that I didn't really like, so I'm just using this free Brainworks solo to make this fully mono. Not the nicest recorded bass line. Some of the samples you get off Splice are not the best quality, but I thought this would be quite a good example. So I'm going to bring in the compressor now. Now you can hear that really taming those transients. I've got this actually on quite a slow attack, like on the 1176 the higher number is quicker, but I got a nice quick release. That's without. Now you can hear this is definitely adding some saturation, but it's also really locking that bass in place. It's holding it. It's a very dynamic bass part, and so it needs some quite serious compression to get it to sit there in the mix. Speaking of, let's hear it in the mix.
Are you ready for this? Can you see what I see? I'll make it.
I'm just going to push it slightly.
Work it out for me. Can you change what
Bring that up in the mix.
Can you make me believe? You believe.
So here's without the compressor.
Are you ready for this? Can you see what I see? I'll make it clear to you. Work it out for me.
As soon as you engage that compressor, fills it out.
You believe in me.
And it just sits there in the back of the track, filling out that low end. It's the backbone of the track, basically. Let's have a listen to another classic FET compressor. Bit more modern, this one. This is the Purple Audio MC77. Again, this is modelled on a hardware unit that a lot of people really like, and this official plugin version is from Plugin Alliance. You can see right away you've got independent left and right control, which can be useful. We're using this on a mono source, so it doesn't really matter. We can take a listen. So when I bypass it there, you really feel like the twang of the bass goes. Now, this compressor is definitely a little bit cleaner than the 1176. The version that I've been using is not the cleanest option that they have, but I do like it on bass. Let's just hear these one after the other. So that's the purple. So you can hear the 1176 is a lot kind of softer and fuzzier, whereas this purple is a lot brighter. It sounds more modern. It is more modern, but it's equally holding that bass in place. So in the context of the mix.
Are you ready for this? Can you see what I see? I'll make it clear to you. Work it out.
That's without.
Are you ready for this? Can you see what I see?
This sounds kind of flat now. I'm back in.
Are you ready for this? Can you see what I see? I'll make it clear.
Lovely stuff. Effect compressors are also used really commonly on vocals, and I'm just going to play a bit of this vocal on its own.
Are you ready for this? Can you see what I see? I'll make it clear to you. Work it out.
And this vocal really needs a bit of work, actually. And so I would often do this with most sources before a compressor. If there's a lot of kind of mud or low end rumble or something like that that's going to be activating the compressor, I'll scoop that out with an EQ before it hits the compressor, so the compressor can work more on the parts of the sound that I actually want to keep. So I've got this Pro Q3 here, and I am just going to scoop out a lot of the lows.
Are you ready for this? Can you see what I see? I'll make it clear to you. Work it out for me. Can you change what you see? Can you make me...
I put a little bit of top end in. It's not a radical change, it's just removing some of the boxiness and mud from that vocal, and that is just to give us a slightly more kind of appropriate starting point before we get into the compressor, which in this case is going to be a Blackface 1176. This is probably the dirtiest sounding of the UAD options. Let's take a listen.
Out for me. Can you change what you see? Can you make me believe? You believe in me. Out for me. Can you change what you see? Can you make me believe? You believe in me. Out for me. Can you change what you see? Can you make me believe? You believe.
Now I've got this on the fastest attack and the fastest release, and this is where effect compressor on a vocal can really come in clutch because it's so grabby. Now this is actually, I would say, quite transparent.
You believe in me. Out for me. Can you change what you see? Can you make me...
But you're hitting almost 10 dBs of reduction there. It's going to widen the loop slightly, and I'm going to drive it harder into this compressor.
You believe in me. See what I see. I'll make it clear to you. Work it out for me. Can you change what you see? Can you make me believe? You believe in me.
So you can hear as I drive it into this compressor, and we're starting to really bend the needle now, 20 dBs of reduction, you start to saturate, and the saturation that these compressors impart is real nice, actually. So I'm going to go even further.
See what I see. I'll make it clear to you.
Just going to lower the output gain.
Can you change what you see? Can you make me believe? You believe in me. See what I see. I'll make it clear to you.
So yeah, that's obviously a bit over the top. You can hear the compressors just starting to pump a bit there. It's arguably over compressed, but if we pull the mix back to 50%, then you'll see how this over compressed signal, when blended with the dry, can sound great.
See what I see. I'll make it clear to you. Work it out for me. Can you change what you see? Can you make me believe? You believe in me.
I'll bypass it.
See what I see. I'll make it clear to you. Work it out
And
for
back
me.
in. It's just really filling out that vocal, adding a decent bit of body. Gonna come back to this rock drum loop now. And although this isn't something that you see done often, just to give you an example of what this can sound like, I'm going to drop an 1176 on the drum bus. They're not often used as bus compressors, FET compressors, but you can do it. And if you do it, it sounds like this. So that's without. It's pretty aggressive, and it's a bit fuzzy. All that saturation's kicking in again. But if I pull the mix back, with that, just gives it a little bit of, it's not as intense as saturating that whole bus, but by just blending in a bit of a slightly compressed, saturated signal, you can get a bit of compression magic going on your drum bus. Last example for the FET compressor, and it's got to be a hip-hop vocal.
Move like Prime, I'm Optimus, tight synopsis drop when I level the score. Too crude from the tenement floor. Pause for thought as I draw from the heavenly lake. Walk awkward from enemy gates. So barefaced, no air trace. Move like Prime, I'm up.
That's a pretty nice raw recording. Nothing fancy going on. So I'm going to pull up the purple audio, and I've got quite a slow attack, quite a quick release. And what we should be able to do is to add some kind of aggression to the delivery of that vocal. So I'm going to play quite a short loop so we can really hear what this is doing.
Move like Prime, I'm Optimus, tight synopsis drop when I level the score. Move like Prime, I'm Optimus, tight synopsis drop when I level the score. Move like Prime, I'm Optimus, tight synopsis drop when I level the score. Move like Prime, I'm Optimus, tight synopsis drop when I level the score.
You can hear the slow attack is letting through the kind of impact at the start of each word, and it's giving him a real bit of aggression. It's arguably a bit too much on this. I might be inclined to bring the mix down a little bit or change the ratio, but you get the idea. It's also, the purple 77 can be voiced quite bassy. Like, I can hear when you engage this.
Move like Prime, I'm Optimus, tight synopsis drop when I level the score.
There's some low mids, almost kind of low end punch being added to his voice, which is sometimes desirable, but on some sources you might want to correct for that with some EQ afterwards. Just going to pull up the UAD Blue Stripe, which is one of the cleaner offerings of the 1176 from Universal Audio, and we'll see how that compares. Again, quick release, slow attack. Let's see what we got.
Move like Prime, I'm Optimus, tight synopsis drop when I level the score. Move like Prime, I'm Optimus, tight synopsis drop when I level the score. Move like Prime, I'm Optimus, tight synopsis drop when I level the score. Move like Prime, I'm Optimus, tight synopsis drop when I level the score. Move like Prime, I'm Optimus, tight synopsis drop when I level the score. Move like Prime, I'm Optimus, tight synopsis drop when I level the score. Move like Prime, I'm Optimus, tight synopsis drop when I level the score. Now,
in this case, I think I prefer the Universal Audio. It just sounds more natural. It's not got that kind of slight on the edge of pumping sort of quality that the purple had there. Now, we could tweak these controls, and I'm sure you could get a more natural sound out of the MC77. But these controls are very similar. It's just to show you a little bit about how the character of these compressors, despite being both FET style compressors, can vary. Okay, now on to what's probably my favourite. Optical compressors, or opto compressors, are quite a weird one. Inside the box they have a light source which gets brighter the louder the signal is going into it, and a light dependent resistor which detects that light and controls the gain reduction on your audio. This slightly roundabout way of achieving the gain reduction results in a really smooth kind of compression. They aren't nearly as quick or punchy as FET compressors, and they aren't as clean as VCAs, but they really do have a certain magic to them. These compressors are often very simple in terms of the controls that you get, because the attack and release are actually program dependent. Loud inputs keep the light source lit for longer, so they give a longer release time. The release time is also non-linear. The first half of the gain reduction is usually let go in about 60 milliseconds, but the remaining half can take up to 5 seconds, which is insanely long. The classic example of an opto compressor is LA2A. I've got a really nice hardware clone from Audioscape here in my studio, but there are some other really nice plug-in options available too. These compressors are used all the time on vocals, but they also sound really great on bass, acoustic guitar and piano, even on drums. Let's take a listen. Okay, optical compressors. I'm going to start with the bass, and we'll have a look at the LA2A here, which is probably my all-time favourite compressor plugin. This is the bass dry. So we're compressing that quite hard, getting up to 10 dBs knocked off, I'd say. But it doesn't sound particularly compressed, it's quite transparent, and it's very forgiving, this compressor. Let's just compare that to the purple MC77. Much snappier, much more aggressive kind of sound. Whereas the 1176 just sort of holds it in place. It's very creamy, smooth. But there are tubes in the circuit of this compressor that are being modelled here by the plugin. So it does add a little bit of saturation, which helps to give a little bit of life and sparkle to things. Let's just hear that bass in the mix. First dry.
See what I see, I'll make it clear to you. Work it out for me. Can you change what you see? Can you make me believe?
Just so much more solid with the LA2A working on it. One of the absolute go-to places to use an LA2A style compressor is on a vocal. So we'll hear the vocal dry.
Clear to you, work it out for me.
Again, I'm leaving in this corrective EQ
Can you make
pre the
me
compressors.
believe? You believe in me. Clear to you, work it out for me. Can you change what you see? Can you make me believe? You believe.
No, you might choose to only
Clear
compress
to
that
you,
by
work it out for me. Can you change what you see? Can you
up
make
to
me
7 to 10 dB.
You believe in me.
But you can also drive this pretty hard.
Clear to you, work it out for me. Can you change what you see? Can you make me believe? You believe in me.
And that's only just starting to sound noticeably compressed to me. The other thing that's worth looking at is the tonal characteristics of this. Now, I mentioned just earlier that this does saturate a little bit and it's voiced quite bright.
Clear to you, work it out for me. Can you change what you see? Can you make me believe? You believe in me. Clear to you, work it out for me. Can you change what you see? Can you make me believe? You believe in me.
Just the way this LA2A saturates is kind of magical. It's never harsh, but it just adds some brilliant brightness and clarity that works on so many sources. For example, we'll now have a look at this acoustic guitar and we can compare it to the Kotelnikov. So here's the guitar dry. And now with the LA2A. Super transparent. It's just taming those peaks where the big strums are, but we're getting a really nice bit of detail out of it on the kind of pick on strings part of that acoustic guitar there. And if we listen now to the Kotelnikov, again, really nice and transparent, but it doesn't have that sparkle that we get from the LA2A. Now, it's worth mentioning that there are other versions of the LA2A in the UAD package that I got this one from. There's a grey face version, which is modelled from quite a particular specific unit, which doesn't have this kind of sparkly saturation that they're known for. And that's great. I mean, I mix a lot of pop kind of stuff, so it's really useful having, like, the saturation stage of this is one of the reasons why I reach for it so much. But if you are mixing something that you don't want that kind of hyped, saturated high end on, the grey face version is a really good one to go for. Next up, let's look at tube compressors, also known as valve or Vari. These guys use tubes, which is another word for valves, to achieve their gain reduction. These compressors aren't the most snappy, so you wouldn't want to use them to tame transients, but the way they let some transients through makes them a great fit for buses. The actual compression that tube compressors offer is surprisingly clean, but a lot of the hardware units themselves actually impart some really lovely warmth and saturation from transformer stages or additional tubes in the signal path. The most famous tube compressor, and probably one of the most famous compressors of all time, has got to be the Fairchild 670. These units aren't made anymore, haven't been for years, and they're highly sought after, although you can buy a modern recreation called the Unfairchild for a cool $12,000. Luckily, there are some great plugins available too. Let's take a listen. Alright, so if we're going to talk about tube compressors, we've kind of got to talk about the Fairchild 670, and this would be the tube compressor plugin that I would reach for most of the time. I've never used the hardware version. Everyone I know who has says that they really do have a certain sort of magic to them, whether it's 12 grand's worth of magic is, I think, up for some debate. But regardless, this is a nice plugin. So we'll listen to this on the drum bus. Here are the drums dry. And now with the Fairchild. Now it is subtle what we get from this, but I can hear just a bit more solidity on the kick and the snare in particular. Just going to lower the threshold even further. Compensate with the output gain. It's just adding a really nice subtle bit of weight to those drums, which I really like. Now if we compare this to the SSL, here's the drums dry. The SSL, which is really bringing out the kick and snare, and it's just giving the whole thing a bit of a groove. And the Fairchild, which is just adding a more subtle and less hyped kind of weight to those drums. And some of that will be coming from the saturation stages of the hardware that this plugin is modeling. We'll get another flavor from this if we look at the live drums. Here we go. So we'll listen to the live drums. This is them dry with no compression. And now I'll bring in the Fairchild. So you can hear that on the kind of, there is a sort of gentle fuzziness being added, and there's a nice bit of kind of detail on the tail of the reverb on that snare there. But a nice way to work with rock drums like this is to drive it quite hard. So I'm going to max out the threshold, bring that right down. Input gain can come right up. I'm going to need to level adjust this. So we're getting quite a lot of saturation out of this now. We're driving it pretty hard. But this would be a great time to pull the mix back and get some nice parallel compression. So at 50% dry wet, that's the drums dry. And you can hear how that compressed signal just sits so nicely behind the kit there, adding some power, but it's not too kind of over the top. If we did want over the top, we might do well to look back at our Blackface 1176 here. So I pulled this up again, and we should probably at this stage take a look at a little trick that you get with the 1176s, which is a kind of hack that someone worked out years and years ago on the hardware, where you can actually press all of the ratio buttons in with 4 fingers, and you get this ridiculous kind of borderline brick wall limiting kind of compression that interacts really nicely with the other controls on the compressor and gives you this like very particular kind of distortion, which just so happens to be great on a drum bus. So let's take a listen to this. Dry. Wet. It's pretty aggressive, the flavour of that distortion. I mean, we could go mad. A bit too much, perhaps. But if we pull the mix back, again 50% dry. Nice and powerful there. But the Fairchild does it in a much more reserved, kind of more refined, sort of classy kind of way. It's not aggressive. It's just powerful, quietly powerful. I'd say there's a nice way to describe that. And that's your Vari Mu. Okay, so all the compressors we've looked at so far are models of different types of hardware compressors that are available. But what about the stock options that you get in your DAW? A lot of DAWs offer their own models of analog hardware, such as the vintage compressor in Cubase, which is a loose model of an 1176. But you're also very likely to find a more straightforward offering, which I'd probably just describe as a digital compressor. I think it's easy to get caught up in the hype of these type of compressor plugins, and there's a whole industry built around convincing you that this new model of an obscure compressor we found in a dusty studio basement, which was modified by one-of-a-kind greatest engineer of all time, there's only one like it in the world, is going to take your mixes to the next level. Sure, sometimes a little bit of the mojo that you can get from a compressor plugin can be a useful part of the sound you're working towards, and certainly I have my go-to compressors for various sources, but a lot of the time you just want something to control the volume of your source and maybe do a little tone shaping, and for those everyday scenarios, these digital compressors are absolutely up to the job. They're not modelled in any particular type of hardware, so they're not constrained in any of the ways that hardware is. They're usually very transparent, simple to use, and they can sound great. Here are some examples. Okay, so I get it, stock compressors aren't exciting, but they are really useful, and I think they're sometimes overlooked as tools because there's a lot of fun to be had in buying a new plugin and a shiny new interface and new knobs to twiddle and all the rest of it. But I'd say like 80% of my compression needs could be taken care of by the stock compressor from Cubase, and I know for a fact that Ableton's stock compressor is fantastic. The stock compressor options in Logic are great. Pro Tools is equally great. So it's nice to take a little bit of a look at these today. So we'll start with the kick drum. This is dry. Now, a bit like we had with the DBX before we engaged the sidechain, we are losing some low end out of this. So I'm going to pull in that same EQ that I used to compensate when I was using the DBX. So this is dry. And now with compression and EQ, it's just so much more controlled, tighter, you're getting a little bit more high-end click, the transient is emphasized. And that's going to sit in your mix a little bit better. Just as a comparison, for a fair test, I'm going to turn off the sidechain filter on the DBX and we'll hear. So this is with the DBX. And now I'll bring in the stock. Tiny bit more click we're getting out of the DBX, but I'd say that's absolutely usable in the mix. We'll take a look at the drum bus. This is a situation where I think we're going to miss having a sidechain filter. So we'll compare it to the SSL. This is the drums dry. It is doing a pretty good job there. I've tried to match the settings here. And I'd say there is a nice bit of groove coming out of that. Just sounds a bit flat, you know, when you bypass it. But if we now listen to the SSL, you are just getting a bit more of a groove from this one. And if I try to drive this a bit harder, so we're kind of getting more like 6 dBs, you can hear it's pumping around the kick drum. Whereas that same amount of gain reduction on the SSL, you can get away with it. And that's because we got this sidechain filter for the compressor's detection circuit on the SSL. We'll take a look at the vocal. So this is uncompressed.
Clear to you, work it out for me. Can you change what you see? Can you make me believe you believe in me? Clear to you, work it out for me. Can you change what you see? Can you make me believe you believe in me? Clear to you.
Now I'd say that's working really nicely.
Can you change what you see?
We're getting like over 10, maybe 15 dBs of reduction on the peaks there.
Clear to you.
But it doesn't sound compressed. Lovely and transparent, these digital compressors. We'll compare it to the LA2A.
Work it out for me. Can you change what you see? Can you make me believe you believe in me? Clear to you. Work it out for me. Can you change what you see? Can you make me believe you believe in me? Clear to you.
So we don't get that nice kind of excitement that we get from the saturation that we're getting out of the Teletronics, but it's perfectly workable. And again, you could use, in fact, I'll do a video about this, but when I was talking about using two-stage compression on a vocal with the 1176 and the LA2A, you could do the same with two instances of your stock compressor with different attack and release settings and ratios. We'll have a look at this acoustic guitar now. We'll just get the uncompressed signal again for reference. And now with the stock compressor. That's taming those peaks really nicely. I'm getting everything that I would want from a compressor on that source. But we'll just have a quick look at the Kotelnikov here, which is, certainly a more fully featured compressor. You've got your side chain filter if you want it. You've got two-stage release. And back to our stock compressor. I would be absolutely happy to use the stock in a mix on that source. Let's have a look at the grind vocal now and see if we can get the similar amount of punch out of the stock compressor that we were getting from the 1176. So, dry vocal.
Move like prime, I'm Optimus. Tight synopsis drop when I level the score. Too crude from the tenement floor. Pause for thought as I draw from the heavenly lake. Move like prime, I'm Optimus. Tight synopsis drop.
Okay, we've got a bit of a level boost there.
Too crude from the
just going to correct for that.
Pause for thought as I draw from the heavenly lake. Move like prime, I'm Optimus. Tight synopsis drop when I level the score. Too crude from the tenement floor.
Really nice and aggressive there.
As I draw from the heavenly lake. Move like prime,
but can we get a similar effect from the stock compressor? Let's find out. So dry.
Move like prime, I'm Optimus. Tight synopsis drop when I level the score. Too crude from the tenement floor. Pause for thought as I draw from the heavenly lake. Move like prime, I'm Optimus. Tight synopsis drop when I level the score.
You can see I've gone for quite a slow attack. Super quick release.
From the heavenly lake. Move like prime, I'm Optimus. Tight synopsis drop when I level the score. Too crude from the tenement floor. Pause for thought as I draw from the heavenly lake. Move like prime, I'm Optimus. Tight synopsis drop when I level the score.
I'd say that's doing a great job. It might not have quite the same saturation that we get, which is present in all of these kind of like analog modeling plugins.
The score. Too crude from the tenement floor. Pause for thought as I...
But we could just follow that up with a bit of gentle saturation and we'd be very, very close in tone, I reckon. Okay, so the last thing I want to look at in this video is master bus compression, because most of the compressors that we've looked at so far in this video would be totally at home on the 2 bus. So let's just have a little look at that and we'll start off with the SSL. So here's our dry mix. Bearing in mind, this isn't mixed. I've done a bit of compression and a couple of very, very small EQ moves. But we should still be able to get something out of these master bus compressors. So here's the uncompressed mix.
Are you ready for this? Can you see what I see? I'll make it clear to you. Work it out for me. Can you change what you see?
And that's the SSL.
Can you make me believe you believe in
Not much reduction, less than 4 dBs. And I'll bypass it.
I'll make it clear to you. Work it out for me. Can you change what you see? Can you make me believe you believe in me?
We're just getting, it's a cliche, but it really does glue everything together and things just seem to make a bit more space around each other. Let's listen to the Vertigo VSC2. So here's no compression.
Can you see what I see? I'll make it clear to you. Work it out for me. Can you change what you see? Can you make me believe you believe in me?
It's just a bit of life and sparkle there.
Are you ready for this? Can you
listen to the kick drum.
I'll make it clear to you. Work it out for me.
It's got a nice place in the mix here.
Can you make me believe you believe in me?
And with the compressor bypass, there's some masking going on at certain points. Here we go again.
Can you change what you see? Can you make me believe you believe in me?
The whole mix just ever so slightly more gelled. Okay, so let's have a listen to the Fairchild now. Again, we'll play the mix dry.
I'll make it clear to you. Work it out for me. Can you change what you see?
Now I'll bring in the Fairchild.
You believe in me. Are you ready for this? Can you see what I see?
Perhaps just a little bit too much here in terms of gain reduction.
For me, can you change what you see? Can you make me believe?
And now I'll bypass. What I really like about this plugin is the way that it adds some very gentle body to almost any source. So if you listen to the low end of the vocal, the bass and the kick drum in particular, something about the way that this plugin saturates as it compresses adds just a really lovely bit of heft. So here we go, one last time, dry.
For me, can you change what you see? Can you make me believe?
And wet.
You believe in me. Are you ready for this? Can you see what I see? I'll make it
and dry.
clear to you. Work it out for me. Can you change what you...
It's subtle, but if you pair that with something to add a bit of top end on, then you can get a really nice kind of smile curve on the overall tone of your mix, which is really desirable. I've heard of people dropping this plugin on their master bus, but leaving the threshold so high that there actually isn't any gain reduction taking place. Now, I'm not sure if I really buy into that. Like, I guess there is some saturation going, but to me, this plugin only really does what I want when I'm actually using it to compress. Last of all, let's take a look at what you can do with a stock compressor on your master bus. So again, here's dry. And I'll activate the compressor.
Are you ready for this? Can you see what I see? I'll make it clear to you.
And off.
Work it out for me. Can you change what you see? Can you make me believe? You believe in me.
Now, I don't mind what this is doing to the mids and highs of the track. It's kind of acting how I would like. But again, we've got the issue here that we don't have that sidechain filter like we have on the Fairchild, on the Vertigo, and on the SSL, which means that we're just getting a little bit of pumping around that kick drum and bass element that I don't really want. So I think on the master bus, I would probably not be happy to use the stock compressor. That's it for this one. Hope you found this video useful. Please do like and subscribe for more tips, tricks, resources and downloads from me at Moonshift Audio. Till next time.